Welcome everyone to Storyteller Spotlight. This is brought to you by Mackin Educational Resources. My name is Kaya Heisey. I am from Mackin and I host Storyteller Spotlight. We are very excited today to have Kimberly Brubaker Bradley with us. A few things before we start. Our very special thanks to Penguin Random House for helping us set this up. For those who are joining live today, those classrooms or libraries joining live, we are going to give away, Penguin Random House is going to give away with us 2 complete sets of Kimberly's books. So all you have to do is be here live to be entered for that. And if you win, you'll get an email from Mackin and you'll get those books from Penguin Random House. If you haven't been with us before, just a note that we use the Q&A to add our questions in. So if you have to go down to your bottom of your screen and find it, you might have to hit more to find it. Find the Q&A. That's where we're going to put all our questions. If you want, you can put the name of the student who asked the question, the name of your classroom, the name of your school, whatever you'd like in there for me to ask the question. If you are watching with young people and you take a photo and you put it on social media, tag us in it because we love to see all the pictures of your students watching. Put in your calendars for April 8th. We're having Dan Santat and Lisa Yee talking about the Misfits. April 8th, 1 o'clock Central Time. Okay, and now I'd love to introduce Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. She is the 2-time Newbery Honor winning and #1 New York Times bestselling author of several acclaimed middle grade novels, including Fighting Words, The War That Saved My Life, The War I Finally Won, and Jefferson's Sons. She and her husband have 2 grown children and live with their dog, several ponies, a highly opinionated mare, and a surplus of cats on a 52-acre farm in Bristol, Tennessee. Welcome, Kimberly.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm really glad to be able to talk to you all. I'm going to start out by reading a little bit from my new book, which is called The Night War. The protagonist of this book is a 12-year-old girl named Mary, who is Jewish, a German refugee living in Paris. And the time is 1942. It is almost 2 years since, no, it's slightly over 2 years since the Germans have taken over France and including Paris. And Mary and her parents live in an apartment building in the middle of Paris, and their neighbor is named Mrs. Rosenbaum. Mary's come back from shopping at the marketplace to find a police raid in progress. The gendarmes raided the entire apartment building. There were so many policemen, it didn't take long. They dragged every person they found out into the street. A few men, but also women and children and babies, and frail old people who walked with sticks. Everyone but my mother, who I didn't see, though I looked and looked and looked. I said to Madame Rosenbaum, "Do you think—" "It doesn't matter," she said. "Stay with me." The gendarmes herded us into buses parked on one of the main streets. They were the regular white-topped green city buses that crisscrossed Paris every day, taking university students to their classes, housewives to their shopping, workers to their jobs. Their very ordinariness seemed menacing. The gendarmes found forced more and more people onto our bus. Madame Rosenbaum found a seat and cradled her 2-year-old daughter, Nora. I stood squeezed beside them, trying to swallow the fear that kept rising in my throat. The air smelled desperate. Adults cried. I knew everyone on the bus. I knew their faces, if not their names. My friend Anna stood at the very front, her back to me, her arms around her younger brother. I didn't call out to her. What good would it do? The bus began to move. I closed my eyes and forced myself to breathe. "Miri," Madame Rosenbaum said, tapping my arm, "do you have your identity card?" I did. I pulled it and my family's ration books from my pocket. Madame Rosenbaum sighed. She took the ration books and tucked them into her satchel. "I'll return those if I can," she said. Then she took my identity card. It had my photograph, my name and address, and the word Juve stamped in red across the entire page. Jew. Madame Rosenbaum slid the bus window open a fraction. and threw my identity card out. I gasped. Madame, shh, she said, take off your sweater and give it to me. I peeled off my cotton cardigan. She handed me Nora and put the sweater on. Madame Rosenbaum was a small woman, and the sweater was stretchy. It fit her well enough. Good, she said. It took me a minute to understand. 3 weeks ago, the Germans had made a rule that all French Jews had to wear a large yellow six-pointed star, the shield of David, sewn to the outside of our clothing, on the left side of our chest, over our hearts. My parents and I were never ashamed to be known to be Jewish, but the order made us, and nearly everyone else in our neighborhood, nervous. Why did the Nazis want our Jewishness on public display? Atheists weren't asked to wear symbols. We had to purchase the stars using both money and precious clothing coupons. I had almost outgrown my 2 dresses, and Mamma needed to save our coupons for winter clothing, so she only bought 3 stars. She sewed Papa's to his jacket, and hers and mine to lightweight sweaters we could wear over any of our other clothes. Now Madame Rosenbaum was wearing my star on a sweater over her own star on a blouse. I wasn't wearing any star at all. Neither was Nora. Babies didn't have to. They're not taking us for a work camp, Madame Rosenbaum said. Not with children and old people. And look. She tapped the window. I looked. In front of our bus, and behind it, and in the lane beside it, more buses. Buses upon buses. Dozens of buses, all full. They were rounding up more than the entire Pletzel. They were rounding up all the Paris Jews. Nora cried. Madame Rosenbaum took her back and clutched her tightly against her chest. Miri, Madame Rosenbaum said, I want you to remember something. We always have a choice, not in what happens to us, but in what we do in response. I know, I said. Papa says that. Madame Rosenbaum nodded. She patted and soothed her daughter. And now, she said, her voice very low, is a choice I'm asking you to make. When we get wherever we are going, when they let us off this bus, I want you to run. She looked hard into my eyes. Are you brave enough to take Nora with you? So this is talking about a real historical event, and I am going to show you just a little bit about that. It goes down in history as the Velodrome d'Hiver Roundup, the Veldiv Roundup. Velodrome d'Hiver just means Winter Stadium, and it was this building that you can see here that says Palais up at the top, which means house or palace. This is the only actual historical picture we have of the Veldiv Roundup, mostly because civilians weren't allowed to have cameras during Nazi-occupied France during the war. And if anybody was found with a camera, they would take it and destroy it. So this is the only actual picture of these ordinary city buses letting French Jews into this stadium. But there was a cartoonist who, that's not going to let me do it. Why are we not doing it? Okay, hang on. I will get back to. There was a cartoonist who took pictures, and I'm gonna. Oh man, here we go. That were made into a book. And so this is what that book looked like. And here are some pictures. If you can see these very ominous looking, he drew these after the war. There's French police and people escaping over the skylights. And here's what happened. The French police took 3,118 men, 5,919 women, 4,115 Jewish children, and 6 of the children that went into the velodrome survived the war. Miri, though, is one of the people that escapes, as shown in this picture. And she goes on to have take Nora and be taken out to the countryside where they are trying to find a way to Switzerland and safety, and still trying to find out what happened to her parents, which she doesn't know. So that's the start of the Night War, and I hope that it's a book that you guys will all enjoy. I very much enjoyed writing it, and I'm going to go ahead and ask for questions now, and we'll see how things go.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, we got lots of questions coming in. Here's the
Super.
first one. How many books have you written total?
The Night War was number 20 of my published books, and I have a couple more that are in the pipeline that are coming. So the next one will be out a year from now in April.
A student from Pipkin Middle is asking, what made you start writing books?
Okay, so this is a weird thing, but when I was a kid, if I was walking down the street, I would be telling myself a story in my head about whatever was happening. If there was a dog barking in one of the neighboring yards, that would be part of my story, or somebody coming around on a bike, or however I felt that day. I just kind of was born with this desire to stick everything into story. It took me a long time to realize that not everybody does that, but that's really where it came from. That's why I started writing.
Fifth grade from Sayre School in Lexington is wondering, what kind of research do you do for your books?
It depends a lot upon the book, but for historical fiction, the first thing I need to do is really understand how people lived during that time period. So I need to be able to uh, have my main character wake up in the morning, and that includes like what kind of house are they living in or apartment? Are they sleeping on a bed? Are they sleeping on the floor? If it is a bed, is it, a modern bed with a modern mattress? Is it a feather mattress? What's the situation like? What are they dressed in? What are they going to eat? Once I know all that without even having to think about it, which I usually get by reading books, then I will kind of be able to start the rough draft, and then I'll have to go back and figure out things I don't know. So for this book, I researched the Velodrome d'Hiver Roundup. I actually, because I was writing it during COVID, I had a video tour with a tour guide in Paris who took me through that Jewish neighborhood, which is it was called the Pletzel at the time. It's also called the Marais, and she was a Jewish person herself, and her grandparents had survived the war and still owned property there. So she took me through with an iPad and showed me different things. I later was able to go to Paris and do a little bit more research at the end. A big section of this book actually takes place in the Loire Valley, where there's a famous castle called Chenonceau, and I got to go and visit that, and that was pretty interesting. So you're a lot of it's stuff that I read and research I can do online, but a lot of it is in person.
Okay, here's a two-parter from Ava. What made you want to write about history? And then from Ganella from Glenbrook, why are so many of your books about war?
Okay, those are great questions. I wanted to write about history in part because when I was in elementary school, history was my least favorite subject. It was really boring. It was just this entire list of kind of wars and government decisions, and it seemed really far removed from other people's lives. And then I was lucky enough in college to take a really fascinating history class by a teacher who helped me understand not only how history is what really happens to ordinary people as well, but it's also a set of stories we tell each other about how the past was that sometimes is different from how the past really was. So it became a much more complicated and interesting subject. As to why I write about wars, and one of the things you really want to do is make your books not be boring, because if you guys are bored when you read my book, you're not going to keep reading it, and then I won't sell as many books. So um, I like to sell a lot of books. That's how I make my money. So I'm trying not to be boring, and wars are really not boring. There are a lot of horrible things, but boring isn't one of them. Another thing about World War II that really makes it interesting to write about. First of all, it took place all over the world all at once. And so there are so many stories. There are stories upon stories. My friend Rita Sepetys writes World War II stories about things I had never heard about, even with all the research I've done. Just there's just so many different corners, but also it's a really clear-cut case of good versus evil. The Nazis and Adolf Hitler were the bad guys. Everybody agrees that, and nobody argues about that. And so uh, it's pretty easy to write about in terms of knowing which side, um, history supports. It should support.
Uh, Tegan, a fifth grader, is asking to clarify, is Miri a real person or did you make her up?
Mary is made up. Yeah,
Okay.
Mary is made up. I actually, at the end of the Night War, because I talk about a specific school that Mary attends, and that school is not only a real school in this neighborhood, it is still a public school in France. But when this roundup happened, because this was the first time in history that the Nazis were collecting not just able-bodied men to work in factories, but women and children. And at the end, I run through 169 names of the children from that school that died as a result of the Veldiv roundup. So I have their real names in. Miri is a fictional character.
What were you like as a kid? What was your favorite subject in school? What was your favorite book? That's from Lane.
Yeah, I was a quiet kid. I was the kind of kid that tended to keep watch on everything. Um, I I was chatty with my friends, but probably not with people I didn't know real well. I read all the time. I loved to read. I read stories constantly. My favorite authors at the time, there was one called Lois Lenski who wrote actually historical fiction now. I mean, it wasn't necessarily historical when she wrote it. She was writing in the 1950s primarily. But to me, they read like history. They were things that happened a long time ago. Um, there were different biographies. Actually, there was this weird biography series that I loved as a kid. So, um, pretty much anything I would read anything.
How old were you when you started writing books?
I started writing books when I was in college. I started writing for publication. I started trying to get things published when I was in college, but I wasn't actually a good enough writer yet because writing is like any other kind of art or sport. It takes a lot of time to get good at it. So my first book came out in 1998, which sounds like a long time ago now, doesn't it?
Have you written any books that never got published?
Sure. Yeah, I call them practice novels. And some of them were the stuff I wrote when I was first writing, but I actually wrote one, um, boy, probably about started it about 6 years ago that I have tried really hard to write well. I've written it three different ways, and it's based on a real thing in history. And the problem is that there are kind of some complications with the real story that I can't get around, and so it's just not going anywhere, and we finally had to set it down. So that, I mean, it happens even now. That's not much you're going to do about it.
Lydia wants to know if the names of your characters ever have deeper meaning to you.
Sometimes, but probably not ones that you would that are obvious to anybody but me. Susan from The War That Saved My Life is an example. She is based on one of my favorite characters in one of my favorite novels, which is a book called Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. And Jane Austen died about um, 200 years, 225 years ago. And this isn't her most well-known book or her most well-liked book, but it's my favorite. So, I mean, I know that nobody else would ever get it.
Presley, a fourth grader, wants to know how long does it take you to write a book?
Depends on the book, but on average, 2 to 2.5 years. And that's partially because I write kind of messy. I don't write an outline to start. Some writers do, but I start off just with a character and a problem and start writing. And so I will go through between 6 and 9 complete rewrites of most of my books. I wish that I wrote a little faster, but the truth is, I can write a bad book pretty fast, but to write a good book takes me a while.
A student with the initials BL wants to know, where is your favorite place to do your writing?
Right where I am. I am sitting at my desk. This is in a house my husband and I built, and you can't really tell, but the room is L-shaped. So I'm at one end of the L. There's a window right in front of me. I've got the shade pulled down so it's not bright. There's a window there. That, yeah, there we go. There's my monitor that I write on. I'm my laptop sitting here. And this was designed so that I got lots and lots of light sitting here, but I can't actually see out the windows, so it doesn't distract me. And then if you go around the corner, I have actually a weaving loom and a whole bunch of bookshelves. So this is my favorite place.
Uh, what is your favorite part about being an author?
My favorite part is this time when there's just this little bit of magic that happens when you're writing. Now, if you're going to be a published writer, you really need to take writing seriously. You need to kind of have it be your job and you sit down and you do it like any other job. But every once in a while, as I'm writing, something I completely don't expect happens, either with one of the characters or somebody opens their mouth and says something and it's not what I thought they were going to say, but it fits the story perfectly. And that's when I know I've kind of gotten into this fictional world that has become really real. And that to me is my favorite thing.
Nate in fifth grade wants to know about your awards. How does it feel to win awards for your writing?
So it's really fun. I won't lie about that, especially when it's the Newbery committee calling and saying I had gotten an honor for the war that saved my life or for fighting words. But um awards are entirely out of my control. The story is in my control. Everything I put in these pages I can control, and I can make this the best thing that I can write at the time. I can make this the best version of this story. And then it goes out in the world and I've had books that won awards and books that didn't. Um, and that's not in my control. So it's really fun, but it's not something that I get super worked up about because the other thing is too, any of you that have like read several of the Newbery books, like there are some where you think this book doesn't make any sense to me. I have no idea why it won the Newbery. And then there are other ones where you think this is the best thing I've ever read in my life. And those books are all different for everyone. I'm not dissing the Newbery Committee at all, but what we call a good book, it's not like running a race where the first person across the finish line wins. What's the best book that year? And that depends what kind of book you like.
Um, Mrs. Leadcap, a fifth grade teacher, wants to know who your biggest role model was when you were in fifth grade.
That's a good question. When I was in fifth grade, I moved across we moved, and across the street from me there was this family that I ended up babysitting their kids. But when I first moved in, Mrs. Meg was pregnant with her youngest son, and um, she was just nice and funny, but she also read books and she knew about France and she told me a lot of things. And she was somebody I really admired. And she's kind of been on my mind lately because oddly enough, I went to do a talk in Traverse City in December, and she had moved away from across the street from me when I was 13. And so it had been years and years since I'd seen her. And she lives in Traverse City now. And actually, I stayed with her for the weekend, for the couple days that I was there talking. And so that was really cool and fun.
Is there a time in history that you want to write about next?
The next couple books that I have coming out are actually contemporary, so they're set in modern times, and they are horse stories. They are mostly based on, well, the first one is really based on the story of my daughter's horse, which is a pretty interesting story, and I wanted to write about it. But yeah, there are a lot of time periods that I want to write. I toy with the idea of writing another book about Ada in World War II. I would like to write about some books right after World War II when all of the refugees from all over Europe were trying to figure out what was home. My daughter, who's an adult, she and I are talking about writing a book set in the Field of Cloth of Gold, which is a great name, but it was a tournament held between King Henry VIII of England and King Francis I of France in the 1500s. And since they weren't at war, but they were trying to outdo each other, they tried to outdo each other by uh, their magnificence. They tried to, um, have more jewels and have more costly stuff. And they actually made cloth out of gold. And so that's why it goes down in history as the Field of Cloth of Gold.
Fifth graders from Lexington also want to know, what is your writing process each day?
So I write best in the morning. So usually right after breakfast, I'm at work. And I write, how long I write kind of depends on what else I have going on. Um, Usually I write till lunch and I'll often do something else after that. Do some research or go ride my horse, something like that. If I'm really busy, like right now, I'm under a pretty tight deadline. So, uh, yesterday I wrote all morning. I took a little break around lunch and then I went back and wrote some more in the afternoon. And that's pretty typical if I need to be getting a lot of work done.
When you're done with a book, do you miss those characters?
Sometimes, yeah, yeah. It depends a little bit on where I left them and if how happy I am where I left them at the end of the book and what kind of um, life I can see for them beyond the book because they do become very real people to me.
If you weren't an author, what would you be?
Well, right after college, I was actually a research chemist. I studied chemistry in college, and I also did study writing, but I majored in chemistry. And um, when I was first out of college, nobody was going to pay me to write yet, so I made my living as a research chemist. So that's probably what I would do.
What advice would you give to kids who want to learn how to be a writer?
I would mostly say have fun with it. I think that the people that end up being published writers aren't necessarily the people that are the most talented, but they're the people that stick with it. And every time, you write, like the first draft never comes out the way you want it to. And uh, so again, you have to learn how to be okay with that and then go back and fix it and gradually turn it into what you want. And if you can do that, then you can be a writer. You don't need any other kind of special training. But for kids, I always think that just really enjoying yourself is the key to sticking with it. If you try to make it into a big serious job, it's not fun. And if it's not fun, it gets kind of tiresome. So I really like fan fiction as a way to get into writing. I think that's a great thing that kids can do. You can have some readers sometimes then and you're part of a community, which is neat.
Okay, we are just wrapping up. One more question. Do you ever go visit schools, and what do you like about meeting your readers?
I do go visit schools. I do uh, when I have a new book come out, I often get sent on book tours, and then sometimes schools arrange to have me come. And I really enjoy meeting my readers. I enjoy answering people's questions face to face. I enjoy hearing what people like and don't like about the books because it's not always the things that I like and don't like the most. A good example would be the cat Bovril in The Word That Saved My Life, who is really not super important to me, but he means a lot to a lot of readers. So,
Hey, well, we're just about done. I just want to invite everyone to go over to the chat. I'm going to share the chat with Kimberly after this event is over. So if there's anything you want to say to her or a question that I didn't ask, and you want to put it in the chat, do it now, and I will send her the whole chat file to her. Before we sign off, Kimberly, is there anything that you want to say to all the hundreds or thousands of students watching us today?
just thanks for coming on and hearing about my book and asking questions. I really enjoy talking to you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for putting in such awesome questions. They were really excellent this time. You guys are the best. I will see you next month. Thanks again, Kimberly.
Thank you.
Bye.